All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome again to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator here, Cypher, and we have a lot of news coming at you with a lot of different things that we need to talk about. So we're going to get started shortly. But before we get started, we want to announce that we are doing a charity stream this Saturday to raise money for the Refugee Services of Texas. Refugee Services of Texas, for those that might not know, have been one of the premier groups that have been resettling refugees from Afghanistan and Iraq, especially Afghanistan since the pullout from Afghanistan by the Biden administration. And they have, Texas and California have settled the most refugees. So we felt that in the spirit of Christmas, in the spirit of what we like to do at Crowdsourced Politics, what we are all about, trying to bring praxis and less vitriol and all that stuff to the political space here on Twitch and YouTube and wherever else you might find us, that we felt that this was a good way for us to do just that. So we will be raising $500. We're trying, that is our goal. Our goal is to raise at least $500 for the Refugee Services of Texas. So as you can see, we got a donation set up, everything else we're going to be doing. So be sure to tune in this Saturday. It will be going for roughly 12 hours, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and running until about probably 1 a.m. or whenever I feel like I'm going to get tired. So we will be doing that. And so it'll be on this channel. Have a lot of stuff planned. Going to be doing some debates, some interviews with some refugee experts and the like. So yeah, go ahead and be sure to stay tuned this Saturday. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. If this is the first time you've joined us on the program, we do this every Thursday from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, thereabouts, to about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have a lot of things that we have to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So we are going to start off by talking about the Buildback Better bill and its continued stall in the Senate. So Republicans have requested a new estimate of the cost of the bill, asking the CBO, or Congressional Budget Office, to estimate what would happen if the temporary programs in the bill were extended through all 10 years. However, the bill being considered in the Senate sets limits on those programs, time limits on those programs. It would be up to future Congress to determine whether or not those changes to change those limits. This new CBO estimate is now being touted by Republicans as the true cost of the bill. Billing with the games as well as everything else, they are trying to say, well, their thinking behind this is essentially that, well, people like stuff and they're not going to want to get rid of it, so it's going to end up becoming permanent, so we need to talk about how it's going to be permanent. It's all smoke and mirrors and everything like that. They're just trying to make the bill seem more expensive than it actually is for political gain. Straight line, like politicians like to do. So, continuing on, according to PolitiFact, on Fox News Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, told departing host Chris Wallace that the bill is far more expensive than Democrats claim, and the money it raises falls trillions short of covering that cost. Quote, the Congressional Budget Office says it's not paid for. It's $3 trillion of deficit spending, according to Senator Graham. Graham is, however, incorrect. The bill passed by the House and now in the Senate's hands costs about $1.75 trillion, and according to the CBO figures, would add $158 billion to the deficit over 10 years, not anywhere close to $3 trillion. And if you take that $158 billion and divide it by 10, since we're talking budgets of a year with a 10-year outlay, you're looking at $15.8 billion, a drop in the deficit spending for a lot of economic gain. Some of that economic gain is included in these CBO estimates, but it should be noted that when you spend money in the economy and you get more people working, you create more velocity in the economy, which increases growth, increases GDP. Continuing on. Graham is saying that the deficit would be 20 times larger than the bill at hand. That's like the difference between a grape and a big cantaloupe. He's referring to a bill that's not the Buildback Better Act. At Graham's request, the CBO looked at the impact of extending the temporary programs in the bill for a full 10 years. That is an assessment of a hypothetical situation, not the actual bill, as previously stated. Also according to PolitiFact, Secretary Janet Yellen wrote a memo sent to the Senate last Thursday night. To be clear, this is quotes, to be clear, this would not be confused with a score of the Buildback Better Act, which has already been released. Instead, this analysis is of a bill that the House did not pass, the Senate is not considering, and the president, who has committed to paying for permanent investments, would not sign. These facts are unlikely to change rhetoric being employed by Republicans in Congress. As we've seen since Friday, congressional Republicans are all singing from the same hymnal and following Senator Graham's lead. Quote, Joe Manchin, I believe, will listen to the facts, said Graham, referring to the West Virginia senator hesitation about the bill. Graham's assessment assumes future possible GOP-led Congresses would both renew Biden's programs and do so without paying for them. For his part, it appears that Senator Manchin took this bait as he continues to publicly express his concerns about the size and scope of that bill, because Senator Joe Manchin is essentially bought and paid for by his lobbyist. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's cool. Continuing on. According to the Washington Post, the Plum Line reported, administration's spokesman Andrew Bates argued that it is absurd for Republicans to use such trickery to inflate the fiscal impact of the Build Back Better bill, which will deliver enormous benefits to millions of poor and working and middle-class Americans, given that Republicans blew a huge hole in a deficit with their corporate tax cuts. Quote, there's a particular irony of two Republicans who supported unpopular tax giveaways to the rich that grew our nation's debt by $2 trillion, resorting to this kind of desperate strawman tactic against a popular economic growth bill for the middle class that will reduce the cost to Americans face, Bates told us. Republicans have expressed great confidence that attacking the Build Back Better bill will be a political jackpot, but Bates argues that this tactic shows the opposite. Quote, they have to lie about the president's positions and pretend the Buildback Better bill also includes a second, non-existent bill that he would not support. I honestly can't think of a more laughably discrediting way to lose the argument than this charade. Apparently I'm parched, even the fact that I drank 2 of these cups of water before going on stream. Continuing on, Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer maintains that the Buildback Better Act will pass the Senate before Congress breaks for the Christmas holiday. Unfortunately for the 10 millions of children who are lifted out of poverty due to the expanded child tax credit, at present, all indications are that it's unlikely that the act will pass this year. As always, we at this program will keep you updated as news breaks. In more positive news, Congress has officially passed the debt ceiling increase with almost no time to spare. The Senate passed the measure late Tuesday evening, and the House passed it in early morning hours on Wednesday. As we reported last week, because Senate Republicans steadfastly refused to support resolutions to raise the debt ceiling, the Senate passed a procedural vote that allowed Democrats to vote unilaterally to pass this increase. Republicans don't want to raise the debt ceiling, but they also don't want to be held responsible for a government shutdown. In short, Republicans voted to let their votes not matter. And yes, it is as ridiculous as it sounds. The result is that an additional $2.5 trillion to the debt limit. This has always been accomplished in bipartisan manner, regardless of which party held the White House and congressional majorities. Despite the rhetoric on the right, the debt is for obligations already incurred. It is not additional new spending. Again, we've talked about this on this program before. The reason why this debt ceiling limit exists is to give to give congressmen and senators the ability to have another say on budgets that are passed. If you have Congress being voted every 2 years and you have an election basically happening every year, it gives you the ability to use it as a political cudgel against your opponents. And it's worked to some degree for Republicans' favor and Democrats' favors at times, but at most times, and this is especially true since 1996, it has been to the detriment of the party that has suggested not raising the debt limit. And the reason being for that is because, one, you're already obligated to pay for these programs. This is just a way to pay for those programs you already said that you would pay for, that the government would pay for. And not only that, but since the economy is globally connected, that by the US not agreeing to raise the debt ceiling to pay for its obligations, it has cascading effects across the entire global economy. And lastly, not just because of that, but because of the fact that the US credit rating is directly tied to our ability to pay back our debts in the full faith credit clause of the Constitution, it would lead to credit rating agencies and private lenders lowering their estimates about whether or not the United States government could pay its bills back. For all these reasons, it is a very bad idea to let the debt ceiling be hit and not raise it when you've already agreed to do spending. So it really should just be done away with. But because of its political ability to be used as a cudgel, it will not be removed. Unless we get a majority of Democrats or Republicans that finally just say, hey, let's remove the thing. I don't see that happening anytime soon, but it should. So let's continue on. The increase prevented the first time ever federal default and punted the final bill until after the 2022 midterms. Because of course it did. Congressional Democrats are growing tired of senseless political fights like the one they faced on this measure. Their fatigue is obvious in their reported comments not only on the debt ceiling, but on legislation like the Voting Rights Act. VACTech? I don't know what that means, Annie. But hey, welcome to the show. Thank you for watching. All right. So according to the New York Times, some Democrats argued that the contentious contortions to raise the debt ceiling demonstrated why Congress should dispose of the process altogether, as I just said. I think it's very clear that the debt ceiling process has to go, said Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon and the chairman of the Finance Committee. It is now a tool for politicians for political purpose, and it just defies common sense. It has always been a tool for political purposes. That's the only reason this exists. It is used in another way to say, you're spending too much money, or you're spending money in ways that we shouldn't be spending it, cut that spending. That's all this has ever been. Continuing on. Other Democrats suggested that the convoluted workaround was further evidence that the filibuster itself should be scrapped, or that similar expectations should be made for other Democratic priorities. Quote, "We have decided that we must do it for the economy, but not for democracy," Senator Ralph Warnock, Democrat of Georgia, said in a speech to the Senate on the Senate floor. Mr. Warnock argued that a similar special process should be created for passing voter rights legislation that has been filibustered by Republicans. But creating such a process would take the support of at least 10 Republicans, and only one has been willing to join Democrats in support of taking up a voting measure. By contrast, 14 Republicans joined Democrats last week in voting to allow the Senate to take up a bill permitting the debt limit to be raised with a simple majority vote. Quote, "I am sure this vicious tactic, the one used here, has not seen its last use. Far from it," Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah. With a blank check and a new special procedure, Democrats are able to raise the debt ceiling by whatever amount they deem necessary to accommodate their Destroy America bill. God, Mike Lee, just shut the fuck up, you raging troggy fuckwit. Okay. So let's be real here. Senator Mike Lee doesn't like spending. He doesn't like spending on things that help people. He wants to see the government be very, very, very tiny of a government. Basically, he wants to see the economy get destroyed. I mean, he doesn't want to see the economy destroyed, but that would be the logical outcome from his wishes. So Mike Lee can go fuck himself, and we need to do away with this. Now, the reason why Republicans are fighting the Voter Rights Act is because of all the Voting Rights Act stuff that has been tried by Republicans to win elections, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in this program. So continuing on. Does this special carve out of the filibuster in order to increase the debt limit mean Democrats can do it again for voting rights? It seems unlikely. Maybe we should keep asking Senator Manchin and Christian Sinema why that's the case. All right, looking over at some comments today. Okay, cool. Ping test. Yeah, good to see you, Ping test. Hey, Nikki, thank you for the copy. This copy has been created by our lovely CSP Nikki, who has been so gracious to me, helping me set up this program. And so everybody should thank her. Thank her later. Send her some cookies or something. All right, so continuing on. Now, we can't seem to find money for social programs, but by golly gee, we can definitely see money to blow up brown people. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, it's on its way to President Biden's desk for signature. The act carries a $770 billion price tag, $25 billion more than Biden even asked for. The NDAA is renewed as a law every year and has been for 6 decades. The House passed the law last week with a vote of 363 to 70. The Senate was 89 to 10 because, by golly, the American people can't be left weak in the eyes of China, Iran, whatever other fucking country we need to go wiggle or flex our muscles at. And we gotta love the troops, everybody. We gotta love the troops. And we love the troops by giving them giant bombs to drop. And besides, it is a great jobs program because all military equipment is essentially made in the United States. So what's there to lose by having this? I don't know, credibility worldwide or something, whatever. Hey, Shane Glint, glad you could join us as well. So whatever, I don't know. It's one of those situations where you hate to see it, folks. You just hate to see it. Now, let me be clear here, right? This is the thing that among leftists like to tell us all the time. It's like, we don't have money to spend on social programs because we spend so much money on defense. That's not true. This is a political decision. We have the capacity and the ability to spend both on defense in this manner, the 770 billion manner, and social programs we choose not to. We being the United States. And Republicans and Democrats all coming together and saying, hey, fuck you. So if the defense budget was zeroed out tomorrow, you wouldn't see Medicare for all. You wouldn't see a permanent child tax credit. You wouldn't see any of these things because the political will for those things is simply not there. So if you want to see the United States do good social things, get the politics there. That's all I'm saying. Continuing on. The fight to reach a compromise on this year's NDAA was long and fierce, and the compromise bill that will become law didn't please everyone, despite the fact that it's $25 billion higher. The provision requiring women to register for the draft was axed last week, despite the bipartisan support the issue received, due mostly to stiff opposition from a handful of socially conservative Republican lawmakers who thought it would erode traditional gender roles. My God, imagine being so sexist against women that you don't want them to sign up for the draft. Ain't that something, everybody? That is very peculiar. Actually, it's not that peculiar at all. Remember, it's the culture, stupid. And Republicans, a lot of these social Republicans, the ones that you just love to hate and hate to love, is really, they want women in their place. And their place is not on the battlefield. No. That's far too dangerous. That's far too dangerous for our women. That's too dangerous. No. They need to be in the kitchen, making food and having babies. And this thing is backed up again. All right, cool. I don't know what happened. There we go. Okay, this is not working. All right, we're going to fix this camera issue. Boom. Now I'm bigger. All right. So that's what we have here, everybody. We have this situation where you just can't win with it, right? So, yeah, that's why we can't have this thing. Now, it is my personal opinion that the way you get rid of the draft is, in fact, force women to sign up for it. Why is that the case? Well, because unlike dudes, women ain't going to have that shit. This might be a little sexist of me, but I think men typically, by and large, on average, actually think that the draft is something that is necessary. It is something that a lot of men would say, yeah, if we go to war with China, North Korea, maybe Russia, that they would sign up. And in fact, they would say, hey, people aren't signing up. We don't have enough boys to send over there. So we need more people to sign up. But women, no. Women ain't going to take up to that shit. Right? Like, even during the Vietnam War, where the support for the draft was its lowest, people still supported the draft. So they wanted out of the war, but they didn't want the draft to end because that war wasn't just, right? Or at least that was the thinking. So if you want to get rid of the draft and you make it equal for everybody, and sexist Republicans and lefty women will unite to end that shit. Now, the bill also, continuing on, the bill won't include repeals to the 2002 Iraq War or 1991 Gulf War Authorization, another provision that enjoyed bipartisan support. This year's bill does include changes in the military's approach to some felonies by putting them in the hands of military lawyers instead of the commanders. The Military Times adds additional details to this. The law addresses current pressing issues, from strategic competition with China and Russia, technologies like hypersonic, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, to modernizing our ships, aircrafts, and vehicles. Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Jack Reed, Democrat of Rhode Island, had said. The bill reauthorizes dozens of specialty pay and bonuses military commanders said are needed for recruitment and retention, and also includes a new basic needs allowance to give additional financial support to some low-income service members. Okay, so for people that might not know, pay in the military is very tied to two things, right? Your rank and if you have a family. Now, it might not seem like having a family should increase the amount of pay that you get, but the thinking goes is that if you have a family, then you need to be provided housing. And so housing, you get a basic allowance for housing, which you don't get typically as a single soldier member, single service member, until you're of the rank of staff sergeant or above. But if you're lower rank and you're married, you get that BAH. Now, what was happening here is that the basic allowing for food, which is only to support a soldier, and the basic housing allowance are also partly tied to rank. So if you have a lower enlisted person, say a person that's an E4 specialist, which is 4th pay grade of the military and 4th grade of leadership or command, going from bottom up, not top down, obviously, is that you have these situations, and they weren't as rare as you would think, but you had these situations where people were still qualifying for food stamps because they were the only breadwinner in their family. So to avoid seeing the military on food stamps, in the past like year or so, actually, I think I'm overpowering my mic. I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. Let me know if this still sounds okay, please. Thank you. I think that should be good. So what we had was they added this additional money, and all this is doing the same thing. So if you're a single income breadwinner and you're in the military, you're going to get a little pay increase to avoid you being in poverty, which is a good thing. That's the way it should be. I think they might just need to raise pay across the board, perhaps, but this is one way to go about it without raising pay across the board, which would be more expensive. Continuing on. And the measure has language to provide 12 weeks of parental leave to all service members following the birth or adoption of a child, standardizing the rule across the services. Now, what this means is that each service had its own paternity and maternity leave situation. Typically speaking, the Army was a little more the Army and Air Force were a little more generous with their paternity leave situations, and their maternity leave situations were it was a mixed bag. Sometimes they expected women to go back to work too quickly, regardless of the complications of pregnancy that might exist, and be up to military standards, generally speaking, way too quickly. The Marines, Navy, had the lowest paternity and maternity leave policies for their service members. So I believe, actually, don't quote me on this, I just know the Marines and Navy had lower. So by making it 12 weeks both for paternity and maternity leave, it allows service members to take off time to spend with their child shortly after a birth. And if you have two service members that are married to each other, which is really a pretty common thing, they will both get that 12 weeks of leave, and they'll be able to help one another out with those 12 weeks and use them as they see fit. You don't have to take it all at once. So this is a great thing, and this is kudos. Like, this is something that costs more money, so having that budget increase for this particular thing is probably a good idea, but it's not as much money as $770 billion. A lot of the $770 billion actually goes to weapons manufacturing and maintaining the retirement benefits, which the military 3 years ago, changed to make that a bit cheaper for them as well. So yeah, that's the kind of things that happen in the military. But let me know what you think. Ask me questions. Clearly, I was in the military. I was in the military for 7 years, so I know a lot of this information. That's why. So if you need any questions or have any for me, hey, we're going to use my little thing. Go ahead and hit me up on Twitter. Where's my call to actions? Here we go. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this thing I created. Twitter. Twitter, please. All right. So that's at Crowdsourced Poll. Actually, let's do that one more time. I don't want to close it. I want to show nothing. So go ahead and hit me up again at Twitter, Crowdsourced Poll. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, want to be on a program or whatever, that's an easy way to get a hold of me. Thanks. All right, continuing on. Now, this one is interesting. So this is a thing that's been batted around since the 1930s, believe it or not. And it is something that some employers have done, some countries have been more open to than others. What am I talking about? Well, this is the 4-day work week. Now, that might surprise a lot of people, right? 4-day work week, how can you get everything done? Well, with a 4-day work week, it actually shows Studies have shown that you're actually more productive during the 4 days that you're working rather than 5, and it gives people the ability, if you have rotating shifts or whatever, the ability to get things done during the typical workday. And this kind of thing is gaining more support. The House Progressive Caucus has thrown their support behind establishing a 4-day work week, and maybe it's the right time to seriously address the reasons it makes sense. The Hill has reported that the legislation is titled the 32-Hour Workweek Act, and the bill was endorsed by the nearly 100 members of the caucus. Representative Mark Takano, Democrat from California, who sponsored the bill, noted the measure is a move toward a modern-day business model that prioritizes productivity, fair pay, and improved quality of life for workers across the country. After a nearly 2-year-long pandemic that forced millions of people to explore remote work options, it's safe to say that we can't and shouldn't simply go back to normal, because normal wasn't working, Takano added. Takano first introduced the measure in July, which reportedly garnered endorsements from several labor unions. The bill would not eliminate 40-hour weeks altogether, but it would require employers to offer employees overtime after 32 hours. Meanwhile, caucus chair Jalapal, Democrat of Washington, said Takano's bill could put power back in the hands of American workers whose wages have stagnated over decades. For too long, workers across the country have been forced to put in longer hours as their wages barely budge, Jayapal said. It is past time that we put people and communities over corporations and their profits, finally prioritizing the health, well-being, and basic human dignity of the working class rather than their employers, bottom line, Jayapal continued. Quote, the 32-hour work week would go a long way towards finally righting that balance. CBS News explains this research further. The bill would not eliminate longer work weeks, but would require employees to pay time and a half for overtime starting at 32 hours. It would also leave out a number of workers who are currently excluded from legal protections, such as gig workers who are legally considered independent contractors and salaried workers who are exempt from overtime. Takano's bill, co-sponsored by 13 Democrats, comes as a number of countries and companies experiment with a shortened work week, citing reasons from cost savings to mental health. In Iceland, a large-scale trial of a 4-day work week were declared to be a major success, with participating workers reporting less stress and more time for hobbies, rest, or chores, all while work output remained steady or, in some cases, increased. Since the trial ended, 8 in 10 Icelandic workers have moved to shorter time schedules, according to a report issued this summer by ALDA and Autonomy, a think tank. Quote, working time reductions should be considered a powerful, desirable, and viable policy across contemporary advanced economies, the report declared. Similar test runs at companies in Japan and New Zealand produce positive results with workers getting more work done with less stress. Earlier this year, Spain moved to try out a 4-day work week, with the government kicking in up to 50 million euros, $56 million, to cover participating companies' costs over the 3-year trial period. The US crowdfunding company Kickstarter is switching to a 4-day work week as well, following smaller software companies that have made similar moves. Research does back up this trend. Some studies have found that long hours actually make workers less productive, with employees simply producing less and often making more mistakes after about 50 hours a week. And let's be all real here, if you've ever done any work at work, how much time is that actually in a productive mode? How much of that time is being spent scrolling through Facebook, watching YouTube videos, or what have you, especially if you're in an office environment? I am personally guilty of doing this, where every hour, maybe 2 hours or so, I'll take like a 10, 20-minute break. I am salaried, so that's doable for me. But if I was working 4 days a week, I don't know if I would take those breaks. One, I'd be pressured to get more done in that shortened time frame. And two, I know that I have a free day, an additional free day, to get all the stuff done that I need. And I wouldn't have to take off work as often to handle personal business during working hours. So it makes sense that these things are being done by companies and countries across the world. Continuing on with the research. Some studies have found that long hours okay, I read that. One study of 2,000 office workers found that despite working 8 hours a day, the typical worker was only productive for merely 3 of them. The rest of the time was spent on checking social media, reading the news, chatting with coworkers, or making drinks or food. See, told you. What did I say? What did I tell you? Now, still, a 4-day work week has a formidable opponent in American corporate culture, which puts great value on concepts like putting in face time at the office. While the pandemic has dislodged the expectation that workers are to be in physical office, it hasn't done much for actual work time. Indeed, workers who maintained their jobs during the pandemic found themselves working far longer hours than before, a factor in burnout and the current mass resignation. Even before the pandemic, American workers put in much longer hours than their counterparts in other industrialized nations. Now, to be clear, part of this, and I don't recall it being in the copy, is that European countries also give far more vacation time. Not just in terms of holidays, for like national holidays or what have you, but actual vacation time. The typical American worker maybe has a week, maybe 2 weeks of vacation time, with your ability in some tech work to get 4 weeks a year, whereas Europe has 6 to 8 weeks a year, with some countries even offering 12. So that's another factor of this. And it's also another factor in productivity and happiness and work-life balance, etc., etc., etc. So let's see. Among countries tracked by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, only 4 put in longer work hours than America. Those countries being Israel, Korea, Russia, and Mexico. Progressives in Congress, as well as the labor unions that support this bill, voiced a similar argument, saying that the shorter work weeks would help those seeking better work-life balance while allowing people who can't find full-time work today to pick up the slack. Still, the concept has been met with skepticism from many employers, as well as some economists who point out that it's white-collar dream not easily translatable to blue-collar or low-income workers. The current debate smacks of well-to-do folks telling others how much they should work. Dan Hammer-Mesh, a professor of economics at the University of Texas at Austin, told The Atlantic in 2015. Among many blue-collar workers, whose pay has been declining for decades plenty, want the income and are willing to put up with the hard hours, Hammer-Mesh told the outlet. Opponents also point to possible unintended consequences, such as a raise in involuntary part-time work, if employers don't want to pay overtime. After the Affordable Care Act mandated health insurance for workers after a 30-hour work week, the outlet 538 documented a rise in part-time workers as some employers cut hours in response in order to avoid paying for their workers' healthcare. Another thing that is important to note with healthcare is that it makes us less competitive globally. People might know, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Currently, I work for a French company, and I have fantastic healthcare right now. This is probably the cheapest I've ever had to pay for healthcare in my entire life, absent being in the military, which was free because it was military. And it is because they don't have to pay, a lot of the workers are overseas, and they don't have to pay for everybody to have healthcare. So they're able to give extra bonuses in healthcare costs to their American employees. And so this is one of those situations where you could clearly see a difference in a clear difference in the competitive advantage that a universal healthcare system has, absent the alternative, which is what the American healthcare system is. So that is where that is at. So continuing on with additional news today. Hey, welcome everybody again. So there's been another interesting development coming out of Congress. And that development is the ability for the Capitol Police Chief to unilaterally call in the National Guard. Congress passed this legislation this week. Let me start over. Congress passed legislation this week that grants the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police Department to unilaterally request emergency backup from the National Guard and federal law enforcement. The legislation passed both houses of Congress by unanimous consent and was sent to the White House for President Biden's signature Tuesday of this week. The legislation was prompted by the lack of authority of Capitol Police to call in those reinforcements during the insurrection on January 6. Continuing on, so we've covered Congress, let's get into state politics. So, if you've been paying attention to this program, or in the news in general, you know that there is a law in Texas called SB 8 that gives citizens the authority, legal authority, to try to enforce anti-abortion bills through civil lawsuits. Well, takes one to know one. A lot of gun rights groups had said this was coming down, but man, gotta recognize real. Gavin Newsom is trolling the fuck out of Republicans with this one. So let's talk about that. Gavin Newsom is trolling the Texas heartbeat law and the conservative justices in exactly the situation a gun rights group predicted in a friend of the court's brief to the Supreme Court of the United States. NPR reported that California's Governor Newsom on Saturday pledged to empower private citizens to enforce a ban on the manufacture and sale of assault weapons in the state, citing the same authority claimed by conservative lawmakers in Texas to outlaw more abortions once a heartbeat is detected. California has banned the manufacture and sale of many assault style weapons for decades. A federal judge overturned that ban in June, ruling it unconstitutional and drawing the ire of the state's Democratic leadership by comparing the popular AR-15 rifle to a Swiss Army knife as good for both home and battle. California's ban remained in place while the state appealed. Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed the Texas law to remain in effect while abortion clinics sue to block it. The decision incensed Newsom, a Democrat who supports abortion rights. Quote, if states can now shield their laws from review by the federal courts that compare assault weapons to a Swiss Army knife, then California will use that authority to protect people's lives, where Texas used it to put women in harm's way. Newsom said in a statement released by his office on 7 p.m. on Saturday. Newsom said that he has directed his staff to work with state legislature and his Democratic Attorney General to pass a law that would let private citizens sue to enforce California's ban on assault weapons. Newsom said that people who sue could win up to $10,000 per violation, plus other costs and attorney fees. Anyone who manufactures, distributes, or sells an assault weapon in California. If the most effective way to keep these devastating weapons off the streets is to add the threat of private lawsuit, we should do just that, Newsom said. Newsom's Saturday night declaration is a fulfilled prophecy for some gun rights groups, who had predicted progressive states would attempt to use a Texas abortion law to restrict gun access. That's why the Firearms Policy Coalition, a nonprofit group that advocates for gun rights, filed a brief with the Supreme Court opposing the Texas law. Quote, if Texas succeeds in its gambit here, New York, California, New Jersey, and others will not be far behind in adopting equally aggressive gambits to not merely chill, but to freeze the right to keep and bear arms. Attorney Eric Jaffe wrote on behalf of the Firearms Policy Coalition. So, I mean, everybody saw this coming, right? What other laws? Let's do some brain spitballing here. Let's do some predictions here. So what other laws could progressives do to enforce things to take away constitutionally granted rights of people? Well, we could do hate speech. We could make hate speech a civil offense. I'm sure that is partly a civil offense in some cases, but here's one. This one's good. Suing politicians for increasing vitriol in the United States through their rhetoric, specifically around racism denial. Oh, wouldn't that be the swell day, everybody? Wouldn't that be just outright fucking awesome if somebody decided to just one day, I don't know, sue Kevin McCarthy for being a racist shitbag and having it actually go through court and having him to pay all that money to fight it in court? Oh, wouldn't that be something? That would be a violation of the First Amendment, right? In a sense. But because it's the civil people, it's civilly done in court, and the government is not enforcing it themselves, it would pass constitutional muster should the court rule in favor of SB 8. Now, this is why I don't think the court is going to rule in favor of SB 8. And they might more than likely rule in favor of the Missouri? Mississippi? It's one of the M states, one of those southern states, that reduces abortion access, limits the time for abortion to 13 weeks or 15 weeks. Either way, it might be 8 weeks. It might be all of those, actually. There might be multiple laws. It's hard to keep up, to be honest with you. But that is what we'll see. We'll see similar things to that. Continuing on. New York wasn't far behind California in doing the exact same thing. So Attorney General Letitia James, Democrat of New York, praised Governor Gavin Newsom on The View Tuesday for his recent proposal to mimic controversial Texas abortion law to enforce gun control. Co-host Sarah Hines asked James of Newsom's proposal, "Would you do something like that? Is it effective legal strategy?" The answer is yes, James responded. "When I heard about it, I said to my team, we need to follow his lead. And the reason why that is because gun manufacturers and gun distributors in the country are immunized. No liability whatsoever." Quote, "They are the only industry that is protected in the country, and given the carnage and given the fact that this is the 9th anniversary of Sandy Hook, I am sick and tired of prayers and individuals whose hearts go out to all those who have lost lives," James has said. "We can do something about it." Guest host Amanda Carpenter, a moderate conservative who serves as a CNN contributor, asked James if she agreed with the proposal of enlisting private citizens in either the Texas abortion bill or in Newsom's proposal. James noted Newsom's proposal could be an effective way to get around gun manufacturers' immunization and hold them liable. "We are reviewing and talking to Californians, so this is a first, yes. The Office of Attorney General Letitia James is looking at that model, and I congratulate Gavin Newsom. Thank you," she concluded. I am getting very parched here, so I'm going to take a quick second to get some more water. I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. Thank you everybody for staying with me. If you stayed, appreciate it. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is. I'm getting super parched, so I had to get some more water. Oh, thank you, Nikki, for correcting me. It's a 15-week ban. Appreciate it. So where was I? All right, continuing on. So the New York governor's race. That's what we're going to talk about next. Last week, Letitia James ended her bid for governor of New York and announced she will be running for re-election as the Empire State's Attorney General. According to CNBC, "I have come to the conclusion that I must continue my work as Attorney General," James said in a statement. There are a number of important investigations and causes that are underway, and I intend to finish the job. I am running for re-election to complete the work New Yorkers elected me to do, she said. James gained national attention for her leading role in other high-profile fights, including an ongoing effort to dissolve the National Rifle Association over allegations of fraud and self-dealing. She is also pushing forward with investigations into former President Donald Trump's business empire. A civil probe into possible fraud by the Trump Organization took a new turn earlier Thursday when multiple outlets reported that James wants Trump to appear for a deposition next month. James' detractors, including Cuomo and Trump, have accused her of abusing her office for political purposes. Hochul had announced plans to run for governor in 2022, just after Cuomo resigned, and before she took over to complete the last 15 months of his term. This is a very bad day for Donald Trump and the NRA, Hochul said at a press conference Thursday afternoon, calling James, quote, one of the finest attorney generals in the country, and expressing support for her re-election. I am honored to serve as a governor and look forward to running together with Attorney General Trish James, Hochul added. A number of big money donors had signaled to James that her allies that they were sticking with the governor. These people previously told CNBC. These people declined to be named in order to speak freely about these conversations. All right, so that is wrapping up there for the for the state politics angle of the situation. What we got? We got anybody? We got no new comments. All right, so continuing on. Let's go. Let's continue pushing forward about this news shit. Right? So much stuff to cover, so little time, and we are glad that you chose to spend that time with us. So we're going to continue on to inform you and hopefully be as entertaining as possible. Now, we have some SCOTUS updates. So we're going to start first with religious exemptions for New York's vaccine mandate have been denied. The SCOTUS turned down 2 cases this week having to do with religious exemptions for New York's mandate requiring vaccinations for healthcare workers. 2 groups of healthcare workers challenged the mandate, claiming it violates their right to freely exercise their religion. Over the dissent of 3 of the court's conservative justices, the court denied the request by the plaintiffs to stay the mandate while litigation continues. The dispute centers around the lack of an option for religious exemptions in New York's mandate. How on the court reported, the challengers went to federal court saying that they cannot comply without violating their religious beliefs because the 3 vaccines available in the United States all were tested or developed with cells descended from decades-old aborted fetus cells. One of the challengers told the justices that the vaccine mandate imposes an unconscionable choice on New York healthcare workers, abandon their faith or lose their careers and their best means to provide for their families. The use of historical fetal cell lines is routine in the development and testing of drugs and vaccines, and the COVID vaccines themselves do not contain aborted fetus cells. The workers told the court that, like restrictions imposed on worship services to combat the spread of COVID-19, vaccine mandates raise difficult questions about balancing undoubtedly strong public health interest on one side and core constitutional rights on the other. However, the workers continued, it is not difficult to see the New York's uniquely punitive treatment of religious objectors, which is an extreme outlier nationally, violates the Free Exercise Clause. They complained that the New York law originally included a religious exemption, but then eliminated it while maintaining a medical exemption. New York urged the justices to leave the mandate in place. It compared the COVID-19 vaccine requirement with only a medical exemption to pre-existing vaccine requirements for measles and rubella that have been in effect for decades. And the state pushed back against the premise of the healthcare workers' objections to the vaccine, telling justices that Pope Francis and the Conference of Catholic Bishops have said that there are no ethical concerns with vaccines and encourage people to get vaccinated. Fetal cells used during the research and development phase of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the state said, are currently grown in a laboratory, and the thousands of generations removed from cells collected from a fetus in 1973. Moreover, the state stressed, The use of fetal cells lines for testing is common, including for rubella vaccine, which New Yorkers' healthcare workers are already required to take. In October, the court rejected a similar challenge to Maine's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers who sought religious exemptions. In that case, Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett wrote that the court's emergency docket is not the proper place to resolve the merits of the challenges. Justice Clarence Thomas, Sandy Alito, and Neil Gorsuch dissented from the court's decisions not to intervene in the main case, with Gorsuch writing a dissenting opinion. Gorsuch again issued a written opinion dissenting from Monday's order denying the New York challenges emergency requested in Dr. A. V. Hochul. So let's go over that a little bit again. So with the main case, Kavanaugh and Barrett wrote that the court's emergency docket is not the proper place to resolve the merits of this challenge, so it needed to be brought up to the full court and in full view of the light of day. Everybody can hear the arguments, they get recorded, etc., etc. And then the three other really conservative justices, Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch, dissented in the court's decisions not to intervene in the main case, which means that they dissented from not hearing the main case. So that means we can reasonably assume that Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Roberts joined the liberal justices to make the majority opinion, even though this is not recorded necessarily. So that's interesting. I didn't think Brett Kavanaugh would be against that, but maybe it was just the fact that it was in the emergency docket and not the other one. So that's an interesting kind of turn of events. It must be something going on because I am parched today, man. All right, continuing on for another religious case. So separation of church and state and the education in Maine. The media has covered the abortion rights and gun rights SCOTUS cases in some detail, but there's an important case that has largely flown under the radar. Yesterday, the court oral arguments in Carson v. Manchin, prompting headlines like the one from The Atlantic, quote, the sleeper SCOTUS case that threatens the separation of church and state. Let's take a closer look at this case. Carson v. Manchin involves a challenge to the Maine Department of Education's use of state tuition dollars to supplement non-sectarian schools. Under Maine's constitution, the state legislature must require to make suitable provisions at their own expense for the support and maintenance of public schools. But more than half of Maine's 260 school districts don't have their own public schools. The Maine legislature passed a statute allowing those districts to either contract with established public schools or approve private schools in nearby districts to educate their children, or to pay the tuition at the public school or the approved private school of the parent's choice. If the plaintiff wins, states and municipalities could be required to use taxpayer dollars to supplement strands of private religious education that many Americans would find deeply offensive, including schools that exclude non-Christian or LGBTQ students, families, and teachers. From The Atlantic, two sets of parents whose children live in districts that operate no public secondary schools selected the private, non-profit Bangor Christian school because the school's worldview aligns with their sincerely held religious beliefs and because the school's high academic standards. A third family chose a school called Temple Academy for similar reasons. Initially, none of the families sought public tuition for these schools because they allege, given the non-sectarian requirement, such a request would be futile, according to a decision by the Court of Appeals for the First Circuit rejecting their constitutional claims. Nonetheless, the families filed suit, claiming that Maine's non-sectarian requirement violates a number of their constitutional rights, including the First Amendment rights to free exercise of religion. They lost in lower court, and the Supreme Court has now taken up the case for consideration. As a threshold matter, the court will have to decide whether the families have constitutional standing to sue. The court could decide that the lack of opportunity to secure religious education for their children at the state's expense is sufficient injury to provide standing to sue, in which case the justices would turn the case to the merits. Now, I want to just point out something here. It's been long held that the anti-establishment rule of the Constitution means that the government can't pick and choose pick and choose what religions can be supported. So what a lot of states have done is, rather than, for like holiday celebrations or whatever, rather than doing anything religious at all, they've opted to do nothing religious. Whereas some other localities have decided to allow all religions to be present during these things. And this case isn't very much different on the merits of the free exercise clause and what the government can and can't do for the separation between church and state. So there are going to be some interesting merits on this case. Personally, I don't agree with funding sectarian education because that is in de facto effect in many states a Christian lens, and if you open up the ability of the public to or public dollars going to parochial schools, religious parochial schools, then in many states the only parochial schools that will exist, and the only schools for that matter that will exist, are Christian based. So that's where I'm worried about it. But let's continue on with copy. So here are some things that could go very awry. The text of the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from making any law respecting an establishment of religion or preventing the free exercise thereof, offers no clear answers. At the most basic level, the language means that the government cannot establish a national church. In colonial times, some people were required to pay religious taxes, attend an established church, and face punishment for dissent. By 1833, no state had established religions. The First Amendment was designed to move away from such systems. In doing so, it also inherently prohibited states from legislatively compelling church attendance or imposing religious taxes, dictating how a church worships, and giving particular church leaders governmental powers. It also forbids a state from picking and choosing which religions are eligible for government benefits based on non-secular or faith-based reasons. Beyond that, as much of the Constitution, the law is murky and somewhat capricious. The Supreme Court has toggled between the religious liberty of the individuals of faith on the one hand, and the broader interest of society as reflected in neutral laws on the other. In 1878, the court held in Reynolds v. the United States that laws targeting polygamy by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints did not violate the free exercise clause, as laws are made for the government of actions, and while they cannot interfere with mere religious beliefs and opinions, they may with practices. In the Employment Division versus Smith, Justice Antonio Scalia wrote the majority opinion, holding that the free exercise clause, quote, does not relieve an individual of the obligation to comply with a valid and neutral law of general applicability on the grounds that the law prescribes conduct that his religion prescribes. Smith's tolerance of religiously neutral laws is at risk with the newly minted 6-3 conservative majority. If the current court determines that religious freedom supersedes the public good, even when it comes to neutral legislative bans on LGBTQ discrimination, we could see a slew of social justice gains reversed on the theory that the Constitution somehow requires it. At Bangor Christian School, an objective for 5th grade social studies students is to recognize God as creator of the world. 9th graders are taught to refute the teachings of Islamic religion with the truth of God's word. Each teacher must affirm that he or she is a born-again Christian who knows the Lord Jesus Christ as their Savior, and must be an active, tithing member of the Bible-believing church. Teachers at Temple Academy are contractually obligated to acknowledge that God recognizes homosexuality and other deviance as perverted, and that the deviance from the scripture standards is grounds for termination. It won't admit children who identify as gay or who come from homes with serious differences with the school's biblical basis. The Supreme Court has long acknowledged that the First Amendment staves off excessive government entanglement with religion. The mountain of case law and legal tests underscores that there is no obvious black and white answer to whether the Constitution recognizes a parental right to obtain taxpayer-funded religious education if non-sectarian schools are eligible. If a fractured court winds up mandating the use of public education funds to teach a thoroughly Christian and biblical worldview, under these circumstances, the obliteration of America's longstanding separation of church and state may have begun in earnest. Now, as I said a little bit ago, I'm for one against this because I don't think that the government should be involved in the teaching of religious character of anybody. It is one of those situations that opens up a back door for Republicans to de facto create a religious state. Conservative Christians have long held that the primary problem with public education is the lack of God in schools, and a part of the reasons for supporting things like voucher programs is because they know that religious schools will fill in those gaps. And there's also the grift and everything like that, but a big portion of it is for that reason. So if this ruling, and this is the death of 1,000 cuts, which a lot of people say is Robert's actual goal, is to like whittle away at these little things, is that what you'll have this be like, yes, the state is obligated to provide this funding in absence of other means for these parents to have their kids educated, or even if there's other means, they still have to do it because the parents choose to do it. And then the next part of that is, well, a state will get rid of public schools and implement a voucher system, and then that voucher system will go to primarily religious schools. Religious schools that aren't going to be required to teach secular doctrine. So that is the troubling thing here. There have been states that have voucher systems. I think like Indiana has a voucher system where they are required to allow people to opt out of the religious curriculum if they're doing vouchers things, but don't expect that to be the case everywhere. That's all I'm saying. Continuing on with more SCOTUS updates. A California man, Edward Hardman, or let's say, scratch that. Go back. SCOTUS has asked the DOJ for input on Monsanto case. A Californian man, Edwin Hardman, was in his 6th round of chemotherapy in 2015 when he saw an ad that said exposure to Roundup, a popular weed killer, could lead to the exact cancer he was diagnosed with. 4 years later, Mr. Hardman became the first person to prove in U.S. federal court that the Roundup had caused his non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and that in the process, he would help uncover damning secrets about the manufacturer, Monsanto, and its influence in science and government. He won a $25 million settlement against the company that Monsanto is seeking to appeal. According to The Hill, Monsanto petition for appeal comes after a San Francisco-based federal appellate court in May affirmed a trial court verdict that found the company failed to adequately warn consumers about the cancer risk associated with its glyphosate-based herbicide Roundup. In its ruling, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit noted that the case, which applied California state law in federal court, is a bellwether. It could lead to potentially thousands of federal cases to follow. Monsanto is asking the justices to find the California's failure to warn law is superseded by the determination from the Environmental Protection Agency of its product's safety. The company also claimed that the expert testimony offered at trial linking Roundup to Hardman's cancer should have been excluded. The U.S. expert agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, has consistently found that glyphosate I can't pronounce it, I don't know, based herbicides can be used safely and are not carcinogenic, and has stated that a cancer warning would be false and misleading and misbrand the product, a company spokesman told The Hill in a statement. Now, this is one of those situations that have been long by environmental groups and left-leaning political people, been long-standing, has been said that this is causing cancer. some of the studies that this relied on basically exposed a rat in a lab to like 1 million. I'm exaggerating just a little bit here because I don't remember the exact number, but 1 million times what the average person would have been exposed to, and that they developed this kind of cancer. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't causing cancer. It just means that some of the studies that have been linked to that have been faulty. And that should be something that people remember. Monsanto has issues. There's been issues with suing farmers for seed blow off and saving seeds and all kinds of nonsense. Basically suing a farm to acquire the land so it can produce more of its own product and that sort of thing. They were involved in Vietnam, etc. But this particular cancer issue might not be one of them. Further study is necessary, in my opinion, and one of those ways to get those studies is from lawsuits. So I'm okay with this lawsuit going forward. So stay tuned. Be on the lookout for additional studies on this particular thing. So moving on with more SCOTUS updates. So there's a Trump executive privilege lawsuit in the works right now. We're anticipating a quick decision on whether the Supreme Court will hear the case brought by Donald Trump in an effort to prevent records in the investigation into January 6th insurrection. Trump lost in the appeals court this week, saying the executive privilege does not protect the records being sought by the Select Committee and directed that the records be released. The appeals court stayed the order for 14 days to give time for an appeal to SCOTUS, which the former president is sure to file. It's generally agreed that the High Court will simply deny a hearing on the case, thereby allowing the appeals court ruling to prevail. There's no upside for the court to hear arguments in this case, and existing precedent certainly doesn't require them to do so. CNN reported on the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court decision that in its 68-page unanimous opinion, the federal court not only paved the way for House investigators to obtain crucial evidence, but offered a striking explanation of why it came to that conclusion. After rolling their eyes at Trump's argument for keeping the material secret, the judges wrote that, quote, there is sufficient factual predicated for interfering that former President Trump and his advisors played a material and relevant role in what they described as a singular event in this nation's history. Now, the reason for this is that the Supreme Court has largely held that a current acting president is what makes the decision of what is and is not considered to be executive privilege. There are some communications that are like granted that aren't the president doesn't have the ability to do this. There's been some minor case law here and there, but overall it's up to the current president's discretion what is and is not considered to be falling under executive privilege. That's another reason why this case was ruled in the way it was. But regardless of that, we will keep you posted here. So, hey, everybody, welcome. So glad that you are able to join us on this news roundup today. If you have news you want to see us cover on the roundup, or if you'd like to join one of our panels, here's how to let us know. First, join the Discord, which the link is coming at you here in a minute. So Discord is where we have a growing community on Discord, trying to hold things like contests, have these news roundups, panel shows, open call shows, etc. So joining the Discord community is an easy way to get with us on all things that are CSP. And that link is coming coming to all the places we stream to. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is joining the Facebook group. So we run a Facebook group. In fact, our Facebook group gave birth to this podcast. And if that is something that you're interested in, you can join that link where you see it here now. So if you do Facebook, we do a lot of things. We had a contest in Facebook for finding the funniest memes. Through approval voting, people won a nice prize of a pinatagram stuffed with candy. Said some things, was cool. And we're going to be doing more contests like that in the future. For example, predicting outcomes of elections and the like. So go ahead and check that out. We'll also be doing some of these contests to the wider community, and that includes Twitter. So please go ahead and follow me on Twitter, where I share memes, and whatever else I feel like sharing. That Twitter link is here at Crowdsourced Poll. So we'll hope to see you join us on Twitter as well. And if you're watching us on YouTube or later on Facebook, whatever, hey, smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. It lets you know that you're enjoying this program, and it makes the algorithms put us higher up in priority. So go ahead and smash that like button. It really does help us out. Now, continuing on. So we have some news coming out of immigration. So Biden has nixed a salary-based visa selection program. According to the National Law Review, in a motion filed in court in Washington, D.C., the Department of Homeland Security withdrew its support for a rule created by former President Trump just before he left office. It would have given visa preferences to those individuals earning higher salaries. Every year, 85,000 foreign workers are selected via lottery system to obtain an H-1B non-immigrant status, a visa category reserved for specialty occupations that require applicants to have at least a 4-year college degree, and sometimes master's or doctorate degrees. The new rule proposed by former President Trump would have eliminated the lottery system and awarded the visa slots based purely on the highest salaries offered. The advocates against the rule argued that this would largely eliminate HB1 visas for all except those in the highest level positions, significantly reducing the availability of H-1Bs for important entry-level work, including for foreign students graduating from U.S. colleges or master programs who are just starting their careers. U.S. citizens and immigration services will continue to make visa selections by random lottery. Now, the reason for this is that we have a broken immigration system, and so our broken immigration system puts a cap on it, and because America sometimes likes being fair, it does this awarding through a lottery system. And basically all you have to do is show that you are eligible for the H-1B visa is to have a job lined up and they award them to people on a randomly selected basis. Literally pulling things out of hat, having a random number generator pick the numbers for the people that are coming in. And what this allows is for, as stated, lower entry level positions to open up to people that just graduated from college. One of the things that people may not know is that a lot of our highest inventors, no, that's not a good way to say it, most prolific inventors, the people that have gone on to become captains in industry in the United States, have been these sorts of immigrants. People that have recently graduated from college and have secured a job in the United States and are thus working for United States companies and putting that talent, knowledge back into the US economy. So eliminating the highest paid roles is a good thing. And what we should do is probably just expand the program, not indefinitely. You don't want to do it for everybody, but limits or what have you, things. But it should expand the program to an extent. Now, the Biden administration also recognizes the Immigration Judges Union. On Tuesday, the U.S. Department of Justice recognized a union formed by judges across the United States as the sole representative of America's immigration judges. The DOJ also reached a preliminary agreement on the terms of a collective bargaining agreement. This is a reversal of policy from previous administrations, as former President Trump refused to recognize judges' unions' rights. Now, this is a perfect time to tell you about our upcoming charity stream. So we will be raising money on December 18th, this Saturday. Let me double check the date. Yep, this Saturday at 12/18. And we will be raising money for Refugee Services of Texas. For those that may not know, the Refugee Services of Texas is one of the country's largest organizations for resettling refugees from Afghanistan and Iraq. That is primarily due to the fact that many refugees have been resettled in Texas and California, the two largest, California being the highest, but with Texas being a close second. In this program, we will be doing a whole host of things. And you know what? Let me go ahead and pull that up on the screen so you can all see it. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, I should have did this. All right. And YouTube and there we go. All right. So what are we doing for this charity stream? So we are doing, as you can see, a lot of different things. We're going to have, I'm going to go over the Foreign Affairs debrief, which is my take on a Foreign Affairs article from one of the recent copies of Foreign Affairs. We'll be having some React Andy content and some video game playing and stuff like that in the interims. We're going to have experts come in, and I'm going to interview people that have direct experience with refugees. And that will be taking place from 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if someone you know, or if you would like to be one of the people to be interviewed that have direct experience working with refugees, or maybe be a refugee yourself, or you know somebody, hey, reach out to us. We want to be able to provide the best example and the best knowledge for these kind of things that we possibly can. So we have 2 interviews lined up. We're hoping to get an additional 2. So if you know somebody, or if you yourself have done anything in this realm, reach out to us. We will. We want to accommodate. We want to have you on the show, and we want to share your stories with our wider audience to raise money for this very important cause. We'll also be recording our Cipher State episode on that day. We're going to talk about Mexico and Central America and how the drug cartels are more than drug cartels at this point, and they're doing a lot of push-pull for immigration in general. We're going to have a debate or discussion panel from 7 to 10, and then we're going to end the charity stream with a new program that we at Crowdsourced Politics are calling Praxis Run. Shout out to my wife for helping me come up with that name. And what that program is that me and guest will talk about ways that we can put theory into action, how you can help your community, people, or other things like that. So maybe not just helping your community, but getting involved in politics directly, direct action, that sort of thing. We'll be talking about all the different ways from multiple political perspectives, not just from a liberal left perspective, and how people can make their communities better. So we hope to see you there. That is going to run from 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 18th to the 19th. So be there on this channel at that time, and we hope that you will help us make it a successful charity stream. And the easiest way to donate to this charity stream is pretty much throwing money anywhere that you can. So we have I think I do support. We have a PayPal that's linked to a corporate bank account. You can sub to the channel. You can throw bits. Any money that we raise during this charity stream, the vast majority of it will be going towards this charity. And I say vast majority because there's issues with processing fees and etc. and all that stuff. So whatever money we raise, minus like 2% or so, is going to go to the charity, from Crowdsourced Politics to the charity. So please be here, and we will be going with that. Now, we have some exciting economic news that we want to get through. So we have the Fed took a very big step to a rate hike yesterday, and we will hear the reasons why from Jerome Powell himself. Oh, wrong thing. So let's go ahead and
noticeably lower for this year and next. Supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic and the reopening of the economy have continued to contribute to elevated levels of inflation. In particular, bottlenecks and supply constraints are limiting how quickly production can respond to higher demand in the near term.
Translation: shit's fucked. People are still coming back to work. the factories in Asia and Southeast Asia and elsewhere are taking time to adjust and come back to full capacity. So we are expecting to see that the supply chain itself will continue to have a drag due to that, as well as an unprecedented amount of shipping and containers. A lot of issues. So shipping containers were left on shore from being emptied. And that's causing a bottleneck too. So they're expecting this to continue for some months to come.
These problems have been larger and longer lasting than anticipated, exacerbated by waves of the virus. As a result, overall inflation is running well above our 2% longer run goal and will likely continue to do so well into next year.
So they're saying well into next year. Personally, I feel like it would be around March timeframe where we see inflation to start to decrease here. But it is the Fed's job to be more conservative with that. So they're expecting it to be a bit more or longer lasting, and hence why they're taking measures to try to stop that.
While the drivers of higher inflation have been predominantly connected to the dislocations caused by the pandemic, price increases have now spread to a broader range of goods and services. Wages have also risen briskly, but thus far, wage growth has not been a major contributor to the elevated levels of inflation.
Yeah, because it's a supply constraint.
We are attentive to the risks that persistent real wage growth in excess of productivity could put to upward pressure on inflation.
In other words, if you're not producing anything, we don't want to give you a raise.
Like most forecasters, we continue to expect inflation to decline to levels closer to our 2% longer run goal by the end of next year.
Look. So 2022, they're looking at the upper bound. They're looking at 3.5% with a lower bound. That's what this graph here is. This is a box plot. So it's done in 25%. So the 0 to 25 is looking like around 2.5%, with the median, the 50% number being around, it looks like, actually that's less, we'll say that's 2%, and the median being around 2.5%. So if it's in this range, I think the Fed should be like, hey, we're good. But they want to keep inflation to about 2%. That's their target number. 2% inflation typically means about 5% unemployment, and they fear that keeping inflation higher than that would lead to negative consequences on not only investment but savings, and we can't just have that.
The median inflation projection of FOMC participants falls from 5.3% this year to 2.6% next year. This trajectory is notably higher than projected in September. We understand that high inflation imposes significant hardship, especially on those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials,
unless it is accompanied by raise in wages. Because we're in a supply drought of labor, wages would likely to increase as well. I wonder why we have a issue with labor supply. Oh yeah, 6 million people died globally. Probably way above that, because all the numbers from everybody have been undercounting throughout all the time. In this essentially. And so what we're seeing is that that has put pressure on wages. Not only that, but because of the economic downturn caused by the pandemic, you saw a lot of people retire early, way more than usual. So by retiring early, that means anybody between the ages of 55 and 65 that retired or no longer seeking work because they can't find employment or starting their own businesses or what have you. You're seeing that also put pressure on the labor market. So I think it was important to just hear it from his own words. We'll continue on for a little bit longer.
Like food, housing, and transportation. We are committed to our price stability goal. We will use our tools both to support the economy and a strong labor market, and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched.
All right. So that is what we're having from Jerome Powell. So, wait, we got a comment. The U.S. just crossed 800,000 dead. Yes, the U.S. alone has just hit 800,000. I think that's a lower bound estimate. I think that we are undercounting that by about 150,000 or so minimum. But globally speaking, the last number that I saw was 6 million dead. So let's talk about what Jerome Powell just said and give some additional background to that. So the federal policymakers moved into inflation fighting mode on Wednesday, saying that they would cut back more quickly on their pandemic-era stimulus at a moment of rising prices and strong economic growth, capping a challenging year with a policy shift that could usher in higher interest rates in 2022. The central bank's policy set up a more rapid end to the monthly bond buying program that the Fed has been using throughout the pandemic to keep money chugging through the markets and to bolster growth. A fresh set of economic projections released on Wednesday showed that the officials expect to raise interest rates, which are now set near 0%, 3 times next year. Probably on a quarterly basis, but it could be July, October, December is when they do it. But typically it's going to be around those times. Economic developments and changes in the outlook warrant this evolution, Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, said on the decision to pull back on bond purchases more quickly. By tapering off its bond buying faster, the Fed is doing less to stimulate the economy with each passing month and putting the programs on track to end completely by March. Again, we at this program, well, me particularly, have been saying that we would see inflation noticeably stabilize around March timeframe. Not because of what the Fed is doing here. The Fed needs to do this while it's stabilizing to prevent it from overstimulating the economy. I think that we'll see a normalization in the supply chain by that time frame. Not only because of the shipping lanes opening up and the containers getting to where they need to be, but also because of people returning to work across the world and the factories coming back to full capacity. Not only that, a lot of buying was pushed forward or back. Regardless, buying happened earlier than expected. And for goods such as monitors, computers, cameras, etc., which put strain on the chip supply. Once the chip supply is back and roaring, that's going to put downward pressure on prices for every single electronic good, including cars, which are one of the main contributors to inflation that we're having right now. So if we get the supply of chips back up to par, if we get the shipping lanes open and uncongested, then we should see inflation start to fall. Not only that, but part of the reason that inflation has happened this year is because of drought happening in the entire Western Hemisphere. Coffee's more expensive because Brazil has experienced a drought. Fruits and vegetables because California, the Western Plains in the United States. And the hope is that we'll see a less dry winter and spring, which will increase harvest yields and put downward pressure on farm prices as well. And OPEC. If OPEC goes back to normal, or if Europe starts to get more natural gas, what have you, that's going to put downward pressure on energy prices as well and should help stabilize as well. So I think March is what we're going to see, regardless of what the Fed does. Continuing on with Fed policy, though. That would, by tapering off its bond buying process faster, the Fed is doing less to stimulate the economy with each passing month and putting the program on track to end completely by March. Like I said, that would place Fed policymakers in a position to raise interest rates, their more traditional and more powerful tool, sooner. The Fed has made clear it wants to end its bond buying program before it raises rates, which would cool off demand by making it more expensive to borrow for a home, a car, or expanding a business. That would in turn weigh on growth and eventually price gains. Also, wages and job creation. So this is a double-edged sword, and the Fed has a double mandate. So this is one of those situations where something's got to give. The Fed's new economic projections suggest rates, which have been at rock bottom since March of 2020, might rise to 2.1% by the end of 2024. The Fed's final meeting of the year completed its decisive shift away from providing full blast support to the economy and towards guarding against the risk of rapid and lasting inflation. While officials spent much of the year laying out a patient path for weaning the economy off the Fed's pandemic support, they have become more worried that a burst in prices this year could linger, resulting in a more proactive stance. Central bank officials, who are supposed to maintain price stability and foster full employment, have also been encouraged by strengthening in the job market. Now, again, as said earlier in the program, full employment to the Fed is 5%. We're seeing unemployment now, and we have seen it in the past after during boom times being at 3%. I think the Fed, or the Fed's policy for full employment, should target that 3% number. Why? Because that gets more people integrated into society, not just in terms of how they are able to provide for themselves, but also integrating them into the larger social structure and providing support and stability that entails, which would mean, and when unemployment is low, that means job seekers have a little more bargaining advantage when it comes to wages and other things like that, and that is a good thing. I think that's where the Fed should actually target its unemployment rate. It should be at 3%. Continuing on. Quote, in my view, we are making rapid progress towards maximum employment, Mr. Powell said in his remarks. Fed officials estimated in their new economic projections that the unemployment rate would return to its pre-pandemic level of 3.5% by the end of 2022, sooner than they had previously forecasted. Mr. Powell's public shift to sounding more concerned about inflation came shortly after President Biden announced on November 22nd that he would appoint him to a second term as chair, saying he believed Mr. Powell would focus on both the need to control inflation and fostering a strong economy that creates jobs and pushes wages higher. That timing fueled speculation about whether Mr. Powell turned towards fighting inflation and putting less primacy on keeping borrowing cheap once he had secured reappointment, or that his reappointment gave him a new mandate to act more boldly, knowing he would be around to carry out the plan. But Mr. Powell batted back that idea on Wednesday, providing a detailed look at his own evolution in thinking about inflation and the data that convinced him the Fed needed to speed up its plans, some of which we just watched a little bit ago. Quote, it had nothing to do with it at all, he said of the reappointment, noting that the other Fed officials were already setting up the change on policy before Mr. Biden's decision was announced. My colleagues were out there talking about a faster taper, and that doesn't happen by accident. Continuing on with labor. So, as people know, it was Striketober and it's resigned December. Well, it's continuing on, and we have more pushes for unionization. And that includes mega Goliath coffee chain, Starbucks. So, according to NPR, workers from one store in Buffalo, New York, voted to unionize in a watershed moment for Starbucks, which operates 8,953 stores across the United States. 3 Buffalo area stores held separate union elections. Baristas and shift supervisors from one store voted to unionize in a vote of 19-8, while workers from the second store rejected unionization in a vote 12-8. The third store failed to reach a verdict and faces a legal battle. The election marks one of the highest profile union wins for U.S. restaurant workers, which are among the least unionized in the country. Starbucks workers who voted to unionize will join Workers United, affiliated with the massive Service Employees International Union. Starbucks has promoted its reputation as a progressive employer with generous benefits, arguing that a union is not necessary. If somebody is telling you a union is not necessary, chances are a union is necessary. Now, Starbucks has been great. It has given decent wages. It's given paid time off for its employees. Even its part-time employees. It's provided college tuition assistance and stuff. It's provided a lot of good, but they're still not making as much money as they probably should be. Hence the need to unionize. So continuing on, in fact, Starbucks has fought off organizing attempts in New York City and Philadelphia. Decades earlier, in the 1980s, the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union for a while represented some Starbucks staff. That union still represents workers at some locations run by grocery stores and not directly by Starbucks. Then last year, workers at a corporate-run Starbucks store in Canada unionized. And now, 3 additional locations in Buffalo area and 1 in Arizona are pursuing a union. Quote, I think a unionized Starbucks restaurant will demonstrate to workers that it's not easy, but they can do it, said Rebecca Gavin, a labor studies professor at Rutgers University. We will likely see many, many more organizational drives. In a Thursday letter to staff shared with NPR, Starbucks North America's president, Roseanne Williams, said, for now, the union results entail no immediate changes. The vote outcomes will not change our shared purpose or how we will show up for each other, she wrote. We want to protect partner flexibility, transferability, and benefits across all stores in a market or a district because we know that's important to our partners, which is their name for employees. The Buffalo vote garnered nationwide attention and support from key labor figures such as Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont. The pro-union Starbucks workers advocated for better staffing, training, and pay, including steady wage increases for workers who stay with the company for years, only discovered that their pay is not much more than that of new hires. And this is another thing that you see in a lot of Starbucks, especially now. They are understaffed, especially for very, very busy Starbucks locations. And that understaffing means longer hours and less and worse working conditions. Hence the need for better staffing, training, and pay. Hours before federal officials set the union vote for Buffalo stores, Starbucks announced it would raise its starting pay to $15 an hour. Oh, look at that. Hey, you don't need a union. We got you. We'll give you $15 an hour. You're family to us, bro. You're family. You don't need that union getting between us. We got you, right? Well, do they think it's really just $15 an hour? Like, that's what we've been pushing for fucking minimum wage. But if you're raising the starting pay to $15 an hour to stave off a union, maybe the union can get you a bit better compensation. So, again, if an employer is saying that you don't need a union, chances are you need a union. Continuing on. And boost wages for staff employed longer than 2 years and 5 years, plus make changes to its training and scheduling, basically caving into the demands of the union push to circumvent the other demands that a union would push eventually. Like, come on. Don't play games. And it looks like the first store has started a snowball. According to CNBC, Starbucks baristas at 2 Boston cafes filed for union elections on Monday, becoming the coffee giant's 3rd U.S. market this year to organize. Quote, "We see unions as the best way to make Starbucks a place to have a sustainable career and a true partnership." The organizing committees for the Commonwealth Avenue and Harvard Street cafes in Boston wrote in a letter to Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson. 3 more Buffalo area locations have filed for elections as well as cafes in Mesa, Arizona. Unions, baby. Unions! So Johnson said on CNBC, Mad Money with Jim Cramer on November 7th, that he expected a handful of additional stores to organize as well. So this is great. I don't know about you all, but I love it when I see workers get paid and fight for their respect and dignity that they deserve. Remember, the pandemic did a lot of things, and if one of those things is that it told people that they are essential workers for a year and a half without treating them as such. Ain't nobody got time for that. They deserve a decent wage. They deserve dignity that wage provides and the compensation therein. And this is one way to get it. Going on for more Labor Department investigation stuff. So we have another thing of Apple facing Labor Department investigation. Apple, why? Why is that? Well, let's talk about it. The U.S. Department of Labor has launched a whistleblower investigation into Apple in the latest sign of tensions between the famously secretive company and its current and former employees spilling over into public view. According to CNN Business Reports, we can confirm that there is an open whistleblower investigation at Apple, a Department of Labor spokesman told CNN Business on Tuesday. The Labor Department declined to share any details about the investigation or what prompted it. But former Apple employee Ashley Jovic on Friday received notification from OSHA that it had opened an investigation based on a complaint she filed earlier this year. According to a copy of a letter OSHA sent to Gorvic that was reviewed by CNN Business. Jovic, a former senior engineer programmer and program manager at Apple, has been outspoken in recent months about concerns she said she began raising to the company in March 2021 about environmental and health safety issues at the Sunnyvale, California office where she worked. She told CNN Business that Apple rebuffed her concerns and asked her not to speak about them. Jovic then filed complaints with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Jovic was suspended from her job in early August and fired on September 9th, according to her OSHA complaint, in what she claims was retaliation for reporting her concerns. And the timing gives that credence. In response to the announcement of the Labor Department's investigation and Jovic's claim for retaliation, Apple reiterated its past statements. Quote, "We are and have always been deeply committed to creating and maintaining a positive and inclusive workplace." Prove it. Continuing on, "We take all concerns seriously and we thoroughly investigate whether a concern is raised, and out of respect for the privacy of any individual involved, we do not discuss specific employee matters," according to the statement from Apple spokesman Josh Rosenstock. The Labor Department investigation is just the latest escalation of the group's tension between Apple and its workforce. In recent months, employees have broken the company's legendary culture of secrecy to speak out on controversial hiring decisions, alleged pay disparities, and remote work policies in an employee movement that has come to be known as #Apple2. Apple has also faced complaints by current and former employees to the National Labor Relations Board, including by Apple II leader Janet Parrish, who alleged that she was fired in retaliation for her organizing efforts. Apple did not comment specifically on Parrish's firing at the time. Last month, the company released a statement affirming employees' right to speak out about pay and working conditions, a move that Apple II movement called a win. Again, pressure, public pressure, all these companies are experiencing what we all love and know as the soapbox, and they need to get with the program and start treating their workers better. Every company is falling. Not every company is falling under this, but a large percentage of companies are falling under this. And if you work at a company that is not treating you right, you have the leverage right now to do something about it. Take it while you can. Continuing on, even Dollar General, we're seeing workplace safety investigations. According to the U.S. Department of Labor says that Dollar General is putting worker safety at risk. Go figure, right? Have you been to a Dollar General store recently? There's like one person working, having to haul big boxes everywhere, putting them on tie shelves and stuff, and man the counters as well while doing all this stuff. It's not surprising to me that the U.S. Department of Labor is saying that Dollar General is putting its worker safety at risk. Let's find out why. The Labor Department sharply criticized Dollar General's troubled history on worker safety, saying that the fastest growing retailer in the United States has been putting its more than 150,000 workers in harm's way for years. Isn't that ridiculous? 150,000 people work for Dollar General. Dollar Generals are popping up all over the place like McDonald's and liquor used to. They're going everywhere. In some areas, they're the only place where you can get staples. You know, you can't get fresh fruits and vegetables. We can get your milk, frozen pizzas, whatever, cereal, bread, that sort of thing. And they're treating their workers like shit. Go figure. At the U.S. Department of Labor, the company is recognized for its long history of violations and repeated failures to protect its workers from on-the-job hazards, the agency said in a news release. Dollar General continues to put workers at risk. Since 2016, the Department of Occupational Safety and Health Administration has proposed more than $3.3 million in penalties for safety violations at Dollar General locations across the country. These violations are typically for blocked electrical panels, obstructed exits, as well as forklifts, housekeeping, and sanitation issues. Dollar General has a long history of disregarding safety measures to prevent serious injury or death in the event of a fire or emergency. Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health Doug Parker said in a statement, quote, "This company's troubled history of workplace safety violations must come to an end." The company did not respond to a request for comment on OSHA's allegations. Dollar General is the fastest growing retail chain in America, adding more stores every year than any other U.S. retailer. The company currently operates around 18,000 stores and said it plans to nearly double that number in the years to come. The company has a low-cost, no-frills business model. It does not disclose how much it pays its workers, but industry analysts say it's among the lowest in retail. Of course it is. It's Dollar General. You don't get those cheap prices by paying your workers what they deserve. Maybe Dollar General should unionize. Just a thought. Let's see, where was I? Yep. Dollar General has said it provides, quote, competitive wages and benefits. Bullshit. Competitive means to the company's advantage. Remember that. It's to the company's advantage. Dollar General stores tend to be small and crowded with high shelves and piles of boxes and carts lining the aisles, like I said earlier. Sometimes only 1 or 2 workers are on shift at a time. Again, go to Dollar General. You'll see this all the time. Former executives, store employees, law enforcement officials, and retail security experts told CNN Business last year that the company was failing to protect workers from violent crime as well. Its thinly staffed stores and low-cost approach left workers vulnerable to robberies and other safety hazards, these sources had said. At least 6 Dollar General employees have died during armed robberies from 2016 to 2020, according to a review of news and police reports. Dollar General stores are not unionized, but the company faced a union drive at one Connecticut store earlier this year. Now, we are at about time, and so we got some news of the weird to cover. But before that, I put it in the copy. I don't know. Yeah, what's VOI? V-O-I? Huh? Let me know what VOI is. Sorry, I don't know what that means. And I put it in the title, and so we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk a little bit about the discourse, a little bit of things that happened to Hassan Piker and Wash getting banned from Twitch for using a salty snack or a slur. And so let's what was Twitch's, hold on, I should have this pulled up. Twitch terms of service. We're going to look at Twitch's term of service. Prohibited conduct slur. Derog. You know what? I saw somebody that had it up on their thing. Twitter. I'm gonna look it up on Twitter real quick. Sorry for the short thing. We're gonna do this together. Irrational. No. And then. Oh, am I gonna be able to find this? Oh no. I'm not going to be able to find it, am I? Here we go. Hateful conduct and harassment. That's what I need to on the official Twitch terms of service. Where is this at? Here we go. Here we go. All right, slur. All right. So let's get this up on the screen here. Sorry about that. It took a second to find. Didn't mean to. What's up, my slurs? Hey, Tenflix, what's going on? Glad you could join us. All right, we're gonna put in here. So what do you mean when you say that you will allow the use of some words or terms that might otherwise violate your privacy against hateful slurs? And how do you determine which slurs are used? So how do you determine if something is a slur? This is what we're going to do. This is Twitch's terms of service, the rules of the road for Twitch. So a hateful slur is language that generally degrades or denigrates based on protected characteristics. In the United States, which is what these rules are generally designed to do, that includes race, ethnicity, national origin, sex, sometimes gender, depends on the state, etc. Age is also another one. So maybe OK Boomer might get removed too, but we'll see. We take so protected characteristics. When we evaluate the worst use of the hateful slur, we take context into account, and we do make an exception for the use of some words in terms of empowering ways, or as terms of belonging when such intent is clear. We enforce against the use of hateful slurs globally and in multitude of languages. Oh, we just got to follow. Who just followed me? Hey, thanks, Sour Tangy, for the follow. So this is going to be quick. I just wanted to put that up. And that means that the use of this salty snack as a slur meets the definition that Twitch has laid out. And this is something that has been known, or should be known, to everybody streaming on this platform since December of last year. And that is when they updated its harassment policy to include slurs. Now, if you use this word and you think that, because it doesn't have the power of an oppressor behind it and therefore it can't be a slur, tough cookies. Twitch is calling it one. It doesn't mean that it is as bad as the N-word or as bad as other slurs, but it still is designed to denigrate a race of people. So if you want to stay in the good graces of Twitch, don't use that slur. And that is all we're going to talk about that on this program. So for those that haven't seen this program before, we like to wrap up our segments with what we like to call News of the Weird. And today we have two science stories coming at you for News of the Weird, both coming from TikTok. So let's go ahead and get this going. So the first one here is one about the creation of a chimera, or a human-animal hybrid. Let's listen.
Some crazy news in science today, as this study was just published. For the first time ever, scientists were able to successfully create a chimera embryo between a human and a monkey. It is important to note that for now, it's just the embryo and they were terminated at 20 days. But they also said they need to start preparing the public for this because it is something that's coming and people aren't going to be ready for it. Whether they're using things for organ donors or what, it's weird. This is a weird one. They added that any full-grown chimera involving human cells would need to be thoroughly assessed to see what its mental capacity is, especially if it's being used for organs. So I don't know. Sound off. They said we need to start this debate. People need to start talking about it and preparing for it. So let me know in the comments. I think I kind of know what the comment section is going to be like on this one.
So with this has been a thing that has been known to be coming down the pipeline for at least 30, 40 years. In fact, Michael Crichton wrote a book called Next. It's actually one of my on my top list of science fiction books, or near science fiction, if you want to call it that. And what it does, it explores the ethics around DNA, around DNA manipulation, what people do or do not control of their own DNA, how to ethically move around these kind of things. One of the primary examples in that book was that they created a chimera of a parrot and raised its intelligence to the level of like a 12-year-old. And so they had to start thinking about whether or not this parrot should have human rights because it's an intelligent, sentient being. And publishing that you've created this when everybody knows that this is, well, not everybody, people should know that this is going to be created, is the way to get around, not around those ethical concerns or terminology, but to get those ethical concerns out into the light of day and have people talk about it so that rules and regulations can follow and we can be still moral, upstanding human beings. So that's a very interesting one there. And it is one that science should pursue. It should pursue things like this because it's going to. It needs to be done ethically, so you have to do this. But also because if we can grow human organs, not necessarily inside like a sentient being, but use this kind of technology to grow them out of a petri dish or what have you, we can save innumerable lives down the line. And so that's an interesting thing. So our next story is also a story coming out of TikTok, and it is creating a invisibility shield. I thought this was also interesting. We thought this was also interesting, so we're going to share this one with you as well. And it tells you how to make an invisibility shield.
Did you know that you can use science to make yourself appear to disappear? Today, we're building an invisibility shield. Created with lenticular lenses. The surface of the lens is composed of many cylindrical lenses. Vertical cylindrical.
Hey, thanks for the subscribe, Tenflix. Appreciate it.
lenses bend light only in the horizontal plane. This causes the vertical lines to become diffused and more spread out in the horizontal plane, making it harder to see an image. Horizontal lines become more spread out too, but they're still in the horizontal plane. And that's science.
So that was a fun little thing. I actually don't have my... So that's a funny little thing, and this is something that has been done in the past with this. There's also, interestingly enough, porn likes to come up with a lot of things. So those outdoor porn that you see are actually filmed in a reflective mirror box with a one-way mirror, so that it looks like they're doing stuff in public while they're actually completely invisible to people around the area, and they can't be seen in. So it's a similar practice, it's a similar kind of application. So we thought that was fairly interesting and wanted to share it with y'all. But with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are actually out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end. So hey, go ahead and smash that follow button or subscribe button. It really does help us out. It also lets you know when we will be going live and keep you abreast of all the programs that we are doing here. We also like to remind everybody that we are doing a charity stream on the 18th from roughly 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 19th, covering a whole host of different topics bound around immigration and refugees to raise money for Refugee Services of Texas, who, if you did not know, and I'm repeating this again, have placed the second most amount of refugees coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq. And Cypher State will be part of that charity stream, and that Cypher State is currently scheduled for roughly 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for that day, and we'll be talking about Beyond the Narco State, which is a look about how cartels run some of Central and South America countries, or de facto do in areas, and what that means for the geopolitical stage. If you want to get more involved with the community, join the Discord. Links above and below as needed. We also do another thing with the Crowdsourced Tribune, the not-for-profit that houses the Crowdsourced Politics podcast and our other podcasts, with a writers guild. You can find more information about that on our Facebook page and soon-to-come website. And with that, everybody, as we like to stick around for a moment, we will be rating a person, but as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, as always, keep your head up through the political storm.